don't you? Blue Light Special Part 2, as in Part 2. So we've got Part 2. We've got some additional panelists this time. It's because we ran out of time, and there seemed to be more to say, and there seemed to be more information that we can add and share. I've got a question in a minute for some of you guys that are blue light trainers, trainees, drivers. I'm not really not worried about who answers it first, but just to get a little bit of thoughts. Kev, for today, what are you thinking of? What do you want to see happening?
For me, I really enjoyed last time, so I think that was really insightful into what we can do and what we can't do, and lots of different things. But I think it's more of, I would like to see a little insight into how people train the behaviours. You know, we mentioned about they're on the blue lights, doing the training on the blue lights, but how do they deal with the emotions of that? And I think that'd be quite interesting to hear that side of things.
Fantastic. Yeah, I agree. Neil?
Yeah, very much the same. I enjoyed it last time because of my fire service background as well. It was interesting to see that ambulance and police trained the same sort of way that the fire were, and how they react as well is much the same as well. So yeah, very interested to see what happens today.
Thank you. Sammy?
I'd like to know from the emergency response driver's point of view what kind of feelings they're getting when they're responding to emergency, and what's going through their heads, and are the two conflicting, or are they able to think first, feel after? I'd like to know all those kind of things.
Yeah, nice one. Oh, we're going more thoughts and feelings. Love it. Can't resist a bit of thoughts and feelings. Terry, what are your thoughts, or don't you have any?
Again, like last time, as everyone said, I found it really interesting. I'm just looking forward to find out what else I don't know.
Yeah. Carol did have something else, and I'm hoping Kev wrote it down, because Kev's supposed to do everything in officially written stuff. Carol mentioned the white lines that we covered in the Blue Light Special Part 1 and the red lights, and it's anything else. No, Carol will probably remember. We can bring that back later. Really interesting stuff about the thoughts and feelings. I want to know something a little bit more fact-based just for now. Can I ask you guys that drive anything blue lights, please? What's the deal with why it changes and why there's a beep? There's like a beep of the horn sometimes. I don't understand what's going on. Who's going to answer that one for me? Blue lights and why it changes, why the pitch changes on different bits. No one. Woody?
Hello.
And then Carol. Hiya.
Hiya.
Welcome, Woody.
Thank you. Why they change? A lot. I mean, I'm not going for every service, but I know in an ambulance, the horn is where you operate the sirens. So you may have 2 or 3 different types of siren, depending on the vehicle. I think some have 4. I don't know if this has been explained, but they throw out the noise in different directions, and some are for close contact and some are for far contact. So for instance, you have what you call the wail, which is the one where you're trying to catch the attention of people further down the road.
Right.
And you operate that through the horn. So that's why you get a beep and then the change of tone each time.
Right. So that's actually how they do it. So they're not actually saying you've done something wrong, or because that's what I've often thought, because it beeps sometimes when they're next to you. You know, it's like, well, what did we do? You know, if you're with a new driver, that's what they'll often say. But that's a little bit of info, so that's useful for me. So they've got different tones and different types of sirens for what the environment is. Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks, Woody.
If you think essentially, if you're coming into a busy area like a roundabout, or a traffic light system or something where you really need to get people's attention, you'll get the fast tone. You'll get the much louder and it's much faster, which is in some cases called a yelp. And there's another one which is a piercer, which you quite often hear quite often the police use this going through the roundabout. They put the piercer on, or you know, any of the emergency services really. But the change of the tone is what catches people's attention. So you could follow someone for 5 minutes with the same tone, and the moment you change the tone, they suddenly give you that awareness that they know you're there. And it really is. It is amazing how just the change of the noise alerts the person that you're trying to get their attention.
Right. Fabulous.
They've done nothing wrong.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to know that there's nothing wrong. It's just a gap in our knowledge. Carol, did you want to add anything?
No, he's covered that quite well with the sirens. So yeah, no. But some people they sort of panic when they hear the sirens because they don't know where they're coming from, and I think that's the big one is actually where they're coming from with the sirens. So when we're approaching a hazard, when you do hear a siren, you know, try not to panic and just try and plan with your driving how your thoughts and feelings are going to make you behave when you get a little bit closer, and how you can react appropriately to the siren so we can make a passageway through or gain that way through if it's safe. That's it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Carol. Keith, now not Woody, Keith. Keith, we've got two. Woody, you weren't here earlier, so you didn't know there's a Keith as well, so that's going to be confusing for you. Keith, go.
I was just going to say that if the people keep the same siren on all the time, it becomes immune and people don't actually hear it, they don't take notice of it. So that's the reason why a lot of change of tones, which will alert people more better.
Brilliant. Thanks, Keith. Kim, in the olden days.
I'm going to refrain from what I nearly said, sis. Yeah.
In the olden days.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the olden days.
Right. Well, in this vintage, in the 70s, they were just two tone horns, and you used the car horn to emphasise your presence when you got close to people. So by the time I did a second stint in the 90s, we had sirens, and I guess it's not too different now. We had separate switches to control the different yelps, wail, whatever, from memory that they were. But I think what Woody was saying now is that it's connected to the vehicle horn system. So multiple presses of the horn bring on a different tone. Is that right, Woody? I think that's what I understood. So that explains to me now, as an old person, why there's a little toot every now and then. But no, and I have to say that I think the biggest improvement I ever noticed was the visual aids, actually, because just that on here on that little tiny blue light in the old days and your headlights on in the daytime, nobody ever saw you coming really. So big bar lights now and alternating flashing headlights just as a driver now, that's what I think I see long before I hear a siren. I shall now shut up.
Well, that's trouble with age. I think it affects your hearing. Neil, I'll come to you in a minute. Brilliant. I'm glad because we're getting input from all the services. Ed, you've got a slightly, well, you were going to talk about police kind of blue lights.
Yeah, there's, and I think it's the same in all services, the way that the horns are turned off. There's a double tap that's fairly quickly to actually turn the horns off. Now, one of the major problems we find with young trainees is that they get too excited when they're changing the tone of the siren and cycling through, that they accidentally turn the sirens off. So don't be surprised. And get this point across to students is that sometimes tones can accidentally get cancelled because they cycle through them too quick. So a double tap of a pause of around about 1 to 2 seconds between the strikes will actually cancel the sirens. Then you've got to re-engage them again. And in the police, we have ooh la la ones. We have the French tone, and a lot of students don't like the ooh la la, so they'll try and skip around that and they'll cancel that one rather quickly. So yeah. That's why sometimes you'll hear sirens go off And it sounds like a little bit aggressive because there's like, you'll hear the double tap of the horn as well. And it's purely just trying to get the tone changes correct. And that comes down to how they're feeling. It's that excitement and adrenaline that's running through the bodies. It starts to affect the physical control of the car as well.
Absolutely. So you're talking about the cortisol and the adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
So as a blue light for your guys, as you're training blue lights, and Kim, you must have found the same thing. It surely it affects what happens to you when you get there. That adrenaline rush, and the cortisol, it's fight or flight. They're fight or flight hormones. Fight, flight, flock or freeze, as people like me to say. But it encourages those kind of reactions. Andy, I'll come to you in a second. Because Ed, you're a trainer, and Kim, you're used to doing it. Does it make a difference when you've got all this stuff? Because you said last time, Kim, how you get kind of immune to the sirens. Would you agree, Ed, that do you think, when you retrain, and Carol and anyone else is a trainer of blue lights? Neil, I'll come to you in a minute.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that the driver has to be very aware of, and they have to be very aware of how their emotions are actually affecting the way that they're driving. Depending on the type of job that they go into, adrenaline is going to run higher or lower. I mean, if they're just going to a normal domestic that they go to every week and it's just a case of settling people down, the adrenaline isn't there. But if they get what we call a code zero, which is where an officer's pushed the red button, and it's a case of everybody get there because it's all going to rack and ruin, then the adrenaline is going to be really high. So that they have to sort of still drive the car and get there, because what they don't want to do is cause another incident on the way to there by having a crash themselves. So that they have to, we go through a lot of scenario training where we try and build in those feelings and try and get them to actually experience it so they can recognize when that's starting to happen.
Brilliant. We'll come back to that, because I think, Neil, you were talking about, you wanted to say something about the sirens and the big heavy things.
Yeah, so with the fire engines, that in my day, they've got the two sirens on, like Keith was saying, the yelp and the piercing one. But they've also got a larger, louder horn as well that warns people when you're approaching crossroads, traffic lights, whatever. And it's just a quick, real loud truck horn, shall we say, and then it switches straight to the yelp or the piercing sound, whichever. It's all controlled by the driver's clutch foot. So
really,
yeah, because they're all automatics nowadays. Most fire engines are all automatics, so you've got a spare foot there to be able to control the horn with at the same time.
Wow.
So it's slightly different to the others, but yeah.
Fantastic. Andy, you were trying to say something ages ago too. You have to unmute yourself, Andy. Otherwise we can see you talk. There you go. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, when they were talking about the double tap to turn the sirens off, if they're not careful also, when they do the double tap and mispress the buttons, they can also move this. The intention might be to turn the siren off, but it might actually move it onto the next tone as well. Does that make sense?
Brilliant. Yeah.
And also, they're talking about the different types of siren. I think there's quite a skill involved with the driver as to which siren to use and when to change them as well to have an impact.
I can see a couple of nodding faces. Yeah. Nice one. I think there is. Well, it's a specific training you have to do additionally. So it's not just driving on blue lights. So we always think, and I'm surprised that one of the others in the crew can't control that bit. But I suppose it needs to be the driver, because Ed.
Yeah, got to remember to hit the unmute button. It's very much the driver's choice, and it's a preference to the driver. So to have somebody else in the car doing that control would interfere with the driver, because the driver may want one tone on, and another member of crew would have a different tone on, so that wouldn't work at all. There'd be just too much confusion that would distract the driver then, and it's an unnecessary distraction in a high-risk environment that a driver doesn't want.
Yeah. I suppose, yeah, I suppose it's, I hear what you're saying. It's an added distraction and therefore a risk. Grandfather Kim, go for it.
Ha! I was just, I'm assuming nothing's really changed in real life, just the calendar for these things. But the context of the emergency call can vary from when you start your blue light run to as it develops and you're listening to it on the radio, and sometimes you can be stood down from something or something can be upgraded whilst you're en route. So in my experience a million years ago, it was not uncommon for you to think, right, I need to make a bit of progress here, but you don't need to start driving really fast because, but then it's something might escalate. So now you change the approach to how you're dealing with it, and particularly your use of sirens, etc. Because sometimes you just want to make progress through heavy traffic to get to a relatively minor incident as opposed to an all-out terrifying shout. But I don't know if the others would agree with that, but that's what we don't know, me as a driver now, is where you guys are going and how important it is. I just want to get out of your way. How you choose to do that, it's not for me to judge or have an opinion on. You know, if you need to make loads of noise, fine. If you just want to zip up quietly, that's fine too, because I know you know what you're doing. And that's kind of what I'd leave it at myself. But anyway, I'll shut up again now.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear what you're saying. There's another question I have for you guys. Coming to you in a second, Keith. Another question for you guys then. How frustrating is it when you're following on a dual carriageway motorway style thing and the ones in front just don't move out the way? Isn't there a solution? Is there a solution to making people see you? Because motorway speeds, obviously, you can't hear. So the sirens are ineffectual anyway at that kind of speed when someone's got their music on driving along lane 3 and they don't move. But Keith, go for what you were going to say.
I was just going to say, on the first page of the driving manual, it says drive to arrive, which is what it's all about, really. As you say, if we go too mad, we're going to cause another accident and we're not going to get there to what we need to be, kind of thing. So yeah, drive to arrive.
Keith, you're talking about a different kind of manual? Because I thought of the driving instructor's handbook when you said that. So what manual do you mean?
It might be an old one, probably 21 years old, but it does say on one of the books that when I started driving, it did say basically drive to arrive.
Yeah, I read that one. I didn't read, well, me and reading books, it's not going to go down well. Ed?
Yeah, the one we use is better to arrive late in this world than early in the next one.
Yeah, that's a familiar one. Moving on then. Kev.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a question. I mean, you touched on some of the excitement and the adrenaline that goes through when they get a different type of code comes through. A code 0 seems to be the top
Mick.
one. How do you use that in your training then? Because I know some of you are or have been driving instructors, teaching learners, but how do you incorporate that into your training for the blue lights? I'd be really interested to hear those sides.
So no one's put their hand up. Woody has. Mick, I've remembered you put your hand up a little while ago. No, you didn't. Okay. Woody, please.
I'm not sure if it's the same, but I think it would be in all the services. But certainly in the ambulance service, we're trying to train people to drive the same way despite the call. So the speed that you use, depending on the category of the call, should be the same. So we're trying to tell our students not to go faster because it might be a child, or it might be someone that slipped over, or it might be a cardiac arrest. But obviously human nature is one of those things where people struggle with that. but we try and introduce that in our training, that it's the same approach, no matter what the call is. So obviously emergency call.
So do you, sorry, I'm just going to, do you sort of like practice saying to them, right, this call's come through, this is how I want you to drive, or to put them in that situation, or differently?
I think it's really difficult because I try to use scenarios. So I'll just say to someone, they've got a code 1 or whatever it is, category 1 call. How are you going to drive there? And we'll use Q&A and things like that. And if they say anything different than what they would on a category C, then their mind is obviously then thinking about the incident, which is, we call it red mist. So what they're doing is they're driving in a psychological way, which then loses the safety value of it. So they still use drive to arrive in the NHS. So I do a lot of work for East of England, so I'm presuming most of the trusts are the same. But generally, we try to get our students to try and drive the same way. But human nature is, this is where the GDE comes in strongly. I think the higher levels of GDE, the purpose of the journey is going to be different, isn't it?
Thanks, Keith.
Yeah, it's a really good one. Carol, I'm so glad you're going to say something. I'm so glad. Thanks, Woody. Thanks, Woody.
Okay, so some useful stuff. I think in all the time that I've been in the blue light industry, it's changed a lot from a tell environment to a more thoughts, feelings and beliefs. And we do scenario drives, and that doesn't always emulate the feelings that they're going to get in the real world, but it's a way that we can work to developing their own self-awareness and responsibility, because they can only fill the gap of their behaviour behind each call. And if we can sort of address that gap, for example, I did a scenario drive with a guy who'd had a crash about 4 weeks ago. And what I did, we watch it on a video, but then what we also do is I created a route that was similar to the crash where it happened. And then what we did, we addressed each thought and feeling and his beliefs about each crash as we was going down that road with the sirens on. And it sort of recreated in his own mind and raised his own awareness, because by the end of that training session, he was tired and he'd never thought so much about what he was doing or how he was thinking and feeling on a job. And that's one of the most important things. So there are trainers out there who deliver that, and there are some trainers out there that don't deliver that, but that's where everybody can, even instructors and trainers, need to raise their own awareness of how they deliver training so they can lower the crash accidents and help people raise their own awareness and responsibility, because that's an individual thing. We can't tell them to do that. That's it.
Thank you, Carol. I know that's it. Carol, this is going to make you cringe like crazy. Carol's a good friend of mine, and I am one of the luckiest people, because after that day of training that Carol's talking about, she relayed it to me step by step. I tell you, I was spellbound. It gave me goosebumps up and down, because I had the long version. And the detail that Carol can do, and because of her experience with coaching techniques and really having a good idea about our behavioural intentions and the gap between what we intend to do as a behaviour and what we actually manage to do. And there's that gap that Carol mentioned there, that gap. And that is what Carol nailed. I was absolutely gobsmacked. Sorry, Carol, I know that's probably not comfortable for you, but I just wish that could have had its own one of these. And I think it would have been such a good example of how do you upscale your regular driving instructor skills to really address the GDE for new drivers, as well as people who passed their test donkeys years ago, because that guy had something like 20 years experience on blue lights, I think. Yeah, 18 or 20 years blue light experience. But thanks, sorry Carol for doing that. Keith, you ran and got your book. Wrong one. I saw you appear with a book. A different one. Right. Brilliant. So so it is a handbook specifically. That's what I wanted to know specifically. Di, good. Thank you.
I have been watching these with great interest because it is an area that I know nothing about. And I've been sitting here thinking about this, you know. I've been a driving instructor for many years. And I've done the best that I can do to teach my pupils to deal with blue light drivers. However, you look in the highway code and there's a little short paragraph of what to do if there's a blue light that comes up behind you. And that's all the information that I've had to pass on to my pupils. And that's the same information that was passed on to me as a driver. Now, I feel blessed that I'm here today and I'm listening to all of this and the vast amount of training that the blue light drivers actually have on how to use a blue light, what to do in traffic, what you're expecting, you know, these other drivers to do. And compared to the amount of blue light drivers there are to standard drivers, and in fact, driving instructors who don't know what to do, apart from the highway code saying, don't panic. Well, that's a great bit of advice, isn't it? You know? So my question is really, how can we get this information, which is so important, out to the vast majority? What needs to happen?
That's how I started off the blue light special part 1. That's exactly how I started it off, because I think we as driver trainers, those that are of us that are driving instructors, and you guys out there on Facebook and you guys that are attendees, we can share this information, and we can, but it's a slow drip. It's not going to be an instant thing.
Personally, I think there needs to be like a public information film or something.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's all very well going drip, 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 but it takes too long, Fiona. You know,
well, why don't we do one? Why don't we do a condensed?
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be a campaign to actually tell the public what they need to do in detail. You know, not just a little paragraph in the highway code saying don't panic, you know, because it's useless, absolutely useless.
Well, and the thing about don't as an instruction, when it says don't do something, what do you do?
Panic, of course.
Yes. So it's that NLP, it's about how words
and especially when you don't know what to do when you do panic. You know, because yes. I think people have said here today, the thing that's in your mind is, I've got to let this person through. It could be really, really urgent. I don't want to be, you know, responsible for somebody dying. So the panic is, get out the way, even if you don't know how to get out the way or what the best thing is to do. We have no advice. We have nothing that says this is the best way of doing it, because it's a lack of knowledge. And, you know, it's all very well a handful of driving instructors, you know, the people watching this and the people in here now, it's all very well us now knowing exactly what the best advice is and to trickle that out, but it's not quick enough. There are 44,000 driving instructors who need to know this stuff.
Yeah.
I just find it, you know, brilliant. And thank you, guys. It's brilliant.
Keith wanted to say something, and then Woody.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just when I first started on the ambulance 21 years ago, I was still a driving instructor. And after a month on the ambulance, I went back to all the driving instructors. I said, you need to teach your students. I put notices up in the test centres and everything to make sure they're more aware of us people on the road. And the thing that I do at the moment, I did send you a copy of a sheet that I do just regarding a situation at roundabouts, and I give it to the pupil or the student. They take it home, and I say to them, don't just look at it yourself, do it with your parents and everybody else you know that drive, to find out what you would do in that kind of situation. The one I do is at a roundabout. You'll sit at a roundabout.
So you can add it below in the thread, Keith, when it goes on Facebook. If you're happy to, add it below, and then people have access to it. And it is access, and something needs to change. And I think it's having the different things, because, you know, reading and me, it's just not something I have good access to. Woody, Terry, stop laughing. Really good. Thanks, Keith. I'm hoping you're finished with that. Sorry, talking over you.
I'm not sure if anyone's aware watching this, but if you go on YouTube and you search Blue Light Aware, there's a really good video.
I put it in the adverts, Keith. I put it in but everybody reads the event adverts. I've put it in everything. We need to share that more. It's too long. You need something that's literally the informational kind of, you just need to bullet point it, and people will do that. People will do it, and I think the Blue Light Aware, because it's 15 minutes, I think it needs to be bullet pointed. It needs to be preceded by people that know and do. I've said about them, it's just yeah, but it's something quick and in your face. Yeah, I agree, totally agree.
Perhaps the instructions to take people to hospitals. In their lessons, go around hospitals, because ambulances are coming in and out all the time. Watch what they do. It's a good teaching.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I totally agree. Thanks, Woody. Terry.
Could you just remind me not to upset Di in the future? She's a bit scary when she gets,
You know I love you, Terry. You're okay.
Terry's okay. Yeah, Terry's okay. So the rest of us that need to worry. Right. Is that it, Terry?
Actually, I know Kim's got his hand up, so it's probably a good time if I can ask this quickly.
I couldn't see Kim with his hand up. Oh, thank you.
Can I ask Kim something quickly?
Of course you can.
He just said something really interesting earlier. So the drivers on call, they can hear the conversation between the two people on the phone, the people phoning 999 and 999 call handler. They can hear that conversation.
Well, I doubt it. No, sorry, I didn't make that clear then. No, I'm talking about the radio communication between the police control room, the other vehicles responding to the same incident, that will be updating as they arrive early, so that the control room will be updating those attending. Well, I'm guessing it's the same. I can't see it would have got worse. To updating people who are still travelling to the incident with what the situation is, because you can sometimes, something's reported as dreadful, awful, end of the world, and actually it's just fine, and it only needs one car to deal with it. So then you can start dropping people off, which then leads you to what I touched on last week, which was the art of now cancelling and switching everything off, which I could tell you a story about, but I don't think I'll waste your time on it because time is short. But and the other thing I wanted to ask, actually, can I ask another thing, Fiona?
Of course you can.
Okay, I'm interested in because sometimes these emergency vehicles need the lights on for a reason other than to make progress. For example, a rolling block on a motorway to bring the traffic from motorway speeds down to stationary, so that unseen business ahead can go ahead, clearing debris, things like that. And one of the things we used to have to do quite a lot, and I don't know if you still do it in the ambulance these days, was slow ambulance escorts for spinal injuries. So the vehicles would go at walking pace because they didn't want to cause any further injury to the spinal injury, which would mean the police cars would form a protective box around it. So everything had blue lights on, and you'd go round drain covers and things like that if it was really serious, because the ambulance crew would want to choose the route over the road. So it meant we occupied all the road, but at walking pace, which when you're coming up to a roundabout caused all sorts of confusion. So what I'm trying to get at, I think, is that we, as drivers, ordinary, don't know what you guys need to do. So we just get out of your way and let you get on with whatever you're doing. That was my bit there.
Yeah. Yeah, good bit. Good bit. I'm wondering now, Kim, is that the days before the restraints? So because we've got
I don't know, that's what I'm
here.
asking, but I'm trying to put it in context that people would have assumed when they saw blue lights that everything was going to be moving quickly, but actually it was moving very slowly. And the other thing, of course, that the police guys have to deal with is vehicle pursuits and how you mix it with the public there, because that can go terribly exciting. But you don't need me to tell you that.
Yes, been involved in those. Ed, I think you were the one.
Yeah, just to follow up on what Kim was talking about there, we do quite a lot of training with escort training for like prison buses and large load, etc. So abnormal loads. So that'll require quite often a fleet of cars to go with something, and then we cause roadblocks, block junctions off, clear roads, make sure that the route, there's a lot of route designing goes into that, because obviously you've got to, sometimes with abnormal loads, you've got narrow spaces where you'll need to clear traffic out before the ab load gets there. So yeah, it's not always a emergency response that you'll see. You'll just see the cars with blue lights. Quite often we won't use sirens at that point as well.
Yeah, Kim was saying that last time. Yeah, go on, Kim.
And that's exactly what I was getting at, is that we don't know what the purpose of the blue light and the positioning is. So just take your cue from the emergency vehicle and just keep out of the way, because there's all sorts of things that could be going on that we're looking for something that they're going to and we can't see it, or we don't know what they're doing. So just stay out of the way, I think.
Communication's a big thing, Kim. I know some of our trainers advocate one of the passengers in the police vehicles, so they run in pairs, and then the passenger will get out, and then there'll be some communication going off to let people know what is happening.
Yeah, it is confusing. It is confusing for us, especially, I mean, when you think about it, those of us that are driver trainers here, do you ever feel like you're overloaded with the amount of things that you want the new driver to understand, know and be able to do before they go for test, or before they're driving around on their own? I think sometimes we can feel overloaded, and how can we always remember who's done what with whom? Kev, you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's our lack of information as well, though, isn't it? For us not to bring it in our training. I mean, for me personally, I bring a lot of the big lorries in because I used to drive them, so I bring a lot of that in. But I'm not very much a blue light trained, so I'll bring a certain amount of that in, but there won't be as much compared to the lorries. So, these are the sort of things that I think we need a broader knowledge base so that we can impart that information sometimes through coaching conversations, because that's where the real learning comes in. And like Carol mentioned earlier, having her coaching conversation with that student that just had a crash has longer lasting effect. So that's the sort of thing that's happening. I think that's what you was talking about. I've gone off on one, but there you go.
Yeah, no, well, I don't blame you for going off on one. So basically what you're saying was, as the DVSA have changed the structure to include a more coaching approach, or client-centered if you prefer. I don't mind what you define words as, but where you really start to get that person to think and feel and know what they're doing as a driver, rather than you do this, this and this to pass your driving test. But as we get thinking, feeling drivers, that would be a nice phrase, wouldn't it? Thinking, feeling drivers, to feel or anticipate the feelings of the driver of the blue light, whatever it is, or just if you've got them thinking about things, then maybe, Di, you can have that ideal thing of, what do I think I should do in this situation? What do I believe is the right thing now? And how do I feel? Because I'm feeling a little bit uptight about it. And that's what we need to do. We need to get people to do all of that. Neil, Di's got her hand up. Do you want to go before Di? Because you had your hand up first.
Okay, so as trainers, I think it's getting pupils to realise the different size in vehicles. So the police car is probably smaller than the ambulance, and the ambulance is smaller than the fire engine. And it's getting them to realise what the different types of vehicles are going to do. A bit like Kev talking about heavy lorries. So fire engines are going to be a little bit slower, take a lot more to stop. And the weight that we talked about last time in there as well. So I try to get over to mine the different sizes and vehicles and how they will react differently. I don't know if the other trainers think that as well.
Well, this is the thing. When I hear all you guys talking, I think, oh, I haven't gone into any kind of emphasis about lorries, because I haven't driven one. I haven't driven a fire engine, so I haven't thought about the weight and, you know, and those kind of differences. And it's sort of, it's good for me because it makes me think, and I will do better. I will think differently as much as I can, but it's vital. It is, and that's why we're doing this, and this is why it's a special, and we've arranged it on a Sunday, because that's when you guys aren't training people to do dangerous things.
And you've also got to consider as well is normally 9 times out of 10 there might be 2 fire engines coming together. You might get 2 or 3 police cars, but 9, I don't know if it's true, but normally it's 1 ambulance, or depending on the situation it could be 2. I don't know, but certainly.
And then possibly the escort with the police.
Yeah, certainly with fire engines there could be a 5-minute delay between the 2 as well. So it's just thinking about that as well.
Yeah, we did bring that up last week. Always look for vehicle 2 or 3 or more, depending on what's going on. Because when you've got a really big event, you get a mass of blue light vehicles, don't you? So something like those terrible things that happen in London or wherever. Anyway, I'm going off on myself now, Kev. I'm getting it. After Di, Woody.
Yeah,
And
thanks, Fiona. It was just coming back from something you were saying, you know, about thinking, feeling drivers and them doing what they think they should do, you know. And I think that's all very well, but if their information is limited, then the action that they take will also be limited, particularly if that emotion is affecting their behaviour, because they will do what they think is the best thing to do, but it's not always the best thing to do. But they don't know what the right thing is to do. And I think that's where, you know, these guys have a problem, because people just stop. I've seen people stop in the 3rd lane on a motorway. You know, they just stop and you think, what are you doing? But that's what they think is the best thing to do. You know?
So
limited information.
It is limited information. So we could collectively come up with you know, like the only a fool breaks the 2-second rule, or think once, think twice, think bike. If we all came up with, and are they memes? If we all came up with a little saying or phrase, look for vehicle 2, blah, blah, blah. Go for it, guys. If anyone comes up with something in brief that would work, I'd be happy to share it. Imagine if we shared it, put it on bumper stickers. It would work. If you get it, why not? Why not?
What's behind you?
Yeah. Keith, can you mute yourself? Because I think you're having a conversation with someone else.
That's my wife.
Because it's behind you, and I was thinking, what? But this is really important. Kev, we're going to come to shortly. I think we'll be starting thinking about wrapping this up, because I don't want to drag it out for any longer. I think we could talk about this for hours. Is there anyone else? Phil, did you have your hand up a little minute ago? No, okay. And Woody, you were going to say something, I think.
All I was going to say is last week we was on a training run and we got flagged down, and just to say about how many vehicles respond to an incident. I've never seen anything like this. It's in a little rural village in Kent, and as we're driving through on blue lights, people are jumped in front of us, and they are obviously assuming we're responding to their call. And there's a guy on a scaffold, and he's basically, what he's done is he's angle grinded through his leg. So it's quite a nasty one. My guys, who are all, you know, experienced medics, have all jumped out. But by the time we left the scene, there was 9 emergency vehicles there, because it's a hazardous situation. There was they call it the heart team. So 3 of them turned up in one go. In the end, they decided to need a fire engine. So a fire car came down, then a fire truck, and the whole, it's only a small village. It looked like a major terrorist attack had gone off. And people were just panicking everywhere because of all these emergency vehicles as descending all from different directions into this one incident. And it surprised me how many people responded, but that's what sometimes happens. So it's not necessary that it's going to be a major incident, but yeah, just thought I'd let you know in case anyone sees anything like that, to just not panic, you know, because you could think it could be a terrorist attack. You could think anything, couldn't you? The more vehicles you see.
Yeah, no, you're quite right. I think, you know, we do want to get out of the way. One of the things that I've noticed is just how people drive when they're following as well, because I'm sure, Kim, I know you've spoken about this because you're my brother, so I would have heard things, but how family members follow. So if you've got an ambulance, for sure, you know, and I know you guys are trainers more than, but if you've got family members following, or Kim, you probably had that thing where you've escorted people. Do you train to do that, Ed? With do you train to escort plebs? Kim?
Sorry, I thought you were asking Ed. I beg your pardon.
Well, I was Ed and you, and I don't know who's going to answer first.
Well, obviously it was 2,000 years ago when I did it, so but we certainly wouldn't have escorted a non-trained blue light driver. We would have told them specifically to go in the traffic. If it's a relative, say, that from a what we used to call an RTAO collision, now you just say, no, you make your own way to the hospital in normal traffic. Don't don't do anything. Just drive to the hospital. But we certainly wouldn't escort an untrained driver.
No, right, good. Because I've heard, this is hearsay, and this is the problem with hearsay, isn't it? This is what people have said to me. The police have gone in front or followed.
No, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yes, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Ed?
Yeah, no, just back up what Kim said there. General advice is, just make your own way there. If it's essential, I have known it where the police have taken somebody, but not, that will be taking somebody in their own car, but not escorting somebody else.
No, brilliant. That's interesting. Very interesting. But again, we're not used to it. We are not trained at all to drive at blue lights, and yet people validate. There's the reason I bring it up is people say the noble cause, as in they're driving to a hospital, and that's the reason why they're attending the speed awareness course. So the noble cause and that thought, feeling thing, that process that goes on. Di, please.
Yeah, very quickly, really, talking about people following, you know, these ambulance chasers, as we like to call them, you know, the ones who like to take advantage of blue lights. Is that an issue for you guys, you know, to know that somebody's actually chasing you down the road? You're clearing the road and they're following you. Is that an issue for you?
Good question. Keith, you were saying yes?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I've had many a situation where I've been taking a patient down to London, for instance, when I used to work in Surrey and down the A3, and you're looking in the mirrors and you're seeing the family racing up behind you, and they're doing all sorts of things. They're forgetting about all the other cars, and they're just following you. So you can imagine, and many a time I've had to stop and say, please make your own way there. Don't follow me. There's no problem there. Just make your own way. I'm just backing up the other guys with that as well.
So you've actually stopped, Keith? You've actually stopped the vehicle?
Yeah, I've had to stop the vehicle a couple of times and say, the patient's okay, don't worry, make your own way. They've got the red mist and they're just literally following behind you, and it's quite scary to see what they're doing. Very scary and very dangerous.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Keith.
The ones I
Last
meant
one, Don.
more, the ones I meant more was not family. These are the ones who are just, you know, people taking advantage of blue lights, and you're parting the ways, and they're just following you down the road.
Yeah, I think that's what I was getting at. There does seem to be that kind of. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. And again, is it something that we should just, if it comes up in a conversation, to get people to think about as we're training drivers? I wonder what everyone else is thinking and doing. So it's not just us, our new drivers. the blue light drivers, but it's everyone else and their reactions. I think it's such a massive picture. And I do think we are the ones, as in we, the Zoomers and the driving instructors here, we needed the input from all of you experts. So I'm very grateful to you guys, and I'll say that again in a minute, but we'll have a bit of a recap, I think, from Kev. If you could go for a bit of, oh, Kev, Ed, and then Kev.
Yeah, just as an example, something that happened on a course, I think it was either very late last year or early part of this year on one of the advanced courses that was running. They were doing a run on the M1 northbound at 100 plus, and they had a car come up behind, flashing headlights, right indicator, while the police car was in lane 3 of the M1. And this was an ordinary car driver wanting to make progress, trying to get one of our unmarked BMWs out of the way. We were running with no blue lights or anything, so they just thought, obviously, we were general public, but that was at 100 miles an hour, and the car behind was trying to move our car out of the way. Parachute was deployed when the blue lights came on the back of our BMW.
Probably shouldn't have laughed, should I?
No, and another one was one that happened to me while I was in my advanced training on a bypass near, just local to me actually, just down at Selby. 2 white BMWs making progress down a hatched area in the middle of the road. So I was first car. I went past, no, I was second car at that point. We passed a line of traffic, and we passed an Astra VXR, which was probably doing around about 60. We were doing 90 plus. And the VXR, as I pulled back in after completing an overtake on a line of cars, the VXR dropped it a gear, and all you heard was this massive rot, and he passed us. He also deployed his parachute when we put the blue lights on as well. And his excuse was, I wasn't having 2 BMWs past me, I was going to have you both.
Yeah.
So
I think, I mean, that's I mean, they're interesting stories. I'd love to hear the rest of the stories from all the other guys, because there would be amazing stories. I know Neil's got some fabulous stories. Guys, thank you. We're going to have a recap from Kev, please. Let's see how well Kev's done today. You've got to do both.
Right, okay, so Blue Light Special Part 2. We started off talking about sirens and the different types of sirens for the environment. They're louder to get your attention, and also they will change tone to gain your attention as well. And again, the thing was for drivers to plan your journey and not to panic if you hear these sirens, plan your journey. There's extra lights and noises now compared to the older days. We had an example from Kim looking at his old car there. Just to prove the point. Excitement and adrenaline can affect the operation of sirens. So again, if they're in the moment, they have to, from what I heard, was double click and to change the siren, so or change them off. So if you're in that excitement and adrenaline, might be different noises coming. Driver and trainees have to be aware of emotions, and especially if they get a code 0 come through. So again, recognizing the type of I suppose the journey that they're going to be taking up compared to the what they normally might drive like. And the driver's in charge of the tone of the siren to use. It's not down to the other passengers in the vehicle. And the code will also affect the way that they drive to the scene. But they have a little phrase, drive to arrive. And I suppose that's the same for us as well, because we try and teach people it's safer to drive at the speed that you can get there safely. And there's also been a change in the way they train to more thoughts, feelings and beliefs training. Carol mentioned scenario driving and coaching techniques that help. We also mentioned the behavioural intention and how we actually behave and the gap, and how when you're training people using the higher levels of the GDE help. But we also mentioned how can we get this message across to the general public, because in the highway code, Di mentioned there's only a small little paragraph about blue light. So how do we get this message across, which may be something that we can all think about going forward and come up with some potential solutions, I feel. Different speeds of vehicles depending on the job, and this includes high and low speeds. I mean, sometimes they're going very slow because of ambulances with the people in there, and we don't know what's going on in those vehicles as well. We don't know where they're going or what they're going to, so just be aware of that. Communication, and again, we talked about it last time, but we can communicate with them, they can communicate with us. But it also might be that we don't know what's going on, and Ed mentioned they sometimes get out of the car and explain to drivers what's actually happening. Neil mentioned the different size of vehicles, and there also could be more than one. And Woody mentioned how many vehicles sometimes turn up to situations. And it's not necessarily important as such as we might be thinking it's a major incident. So again, there might be lots of vehicles turning up. But there's one thing that I thought, just in summarising the two parts that we've done today, it's all about the thoughts and feelings and beliefs of drivers and how they affect the way we drive. And that is something that needs to come across in the way we teach drivers. So that's my little summary of what's happened and what needs to carry on.
Yeah. So it's down to us. Yeah, thanks, Gil. It's down to us who are trainers, you guys that are drivers of blue lights, you guys that are trainers of blue lights. I really appreciate your input. We couldn't have done it without you. We are trying to change things. If you're watching on Facebook, if it's you guys here on the panel, if it's you guys that are attendees, if you have any way of any thoughts, any ideas, can you add it to the thread on Facebook? Send some of us, one of the Why Don't You crew, if you could send us an email me, contact any of us. We could change things. It would be good. If we save just a couple of lives by the actions that we take from here on in, that would be fantastic. Just a couple of lives, they're vital. And that's what the blue lights are trying to do, whatever they're doing. Blue lights. I'm going to switch off the Facebook Live feed. So thank you very much on Facebook Live. Tuesday the 16th,